Thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Busloads of migrants escalate, leaving a city and a political party divided on what to do. Governor Pritzker pens a letter to the president pleading for help.
We're trying to make sure that migrants are not on floors.
Meanwhile, alderpeople and Chicago residents quarrel over what to do as dozens of busloads arrive by the day. City Council approves a new law mandating tipped workers receive the same minimum wage as all other workers. NASCAR announces Lap 2 for next year and suggests this year's rain-soaked race still made money for the city. In sports,
56 yards, touchdown.
Their backs against the wall, the Bears come out blazing on Thursday Night Football, while Chicago sports fans mourn the death of one of the greatest football players of all time, homegrown linebacking legend Dick Butkus. Indeed, a Chicago icon. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Jim Daly of Southside Weekly, Laura Washington of ABC 7 Chicago and the Chicago Tribune, Madison Saavedra of Block Club Chicago, and Mike Mulligan of WSCR The Score. Let's get right into it. I want to read a little clip from Governor Pritzker's letter to the president saying, quote, "Today Illinois stands mostly unsupported against this enormous strain on our resources." Jim Daly, any signs that federal help is on the way?
Not yet. I mean, what we've seen so far is the president's willing to increase border security by extending the wall, and also he's going to deport Venezuelan migrants, restart those flights, but he has not given any support to Chicago for that. And I think that something that we often have to think about when we're talking about this is that the federal government has quietly resettled Ukrainian refugees in Chicago, and no one's really noticed because they've been given work permits and federal support, and we're not getting that for Venezuelans, and that disconnect is clearly creating problems.
And as Jim mentioned, Laura Washington, the president possibly building more of that wall that President Trump started that was so controversial, starting to deport Venezuelan migrants. Is this a result of blue states and Democrats feeling the pain that perhaps border states have felt for a long time?
It's totally politics, and I think the president is worried that this is going to become a major campaign issue in 2024. The border and migration has always been a hot issue between the Democrats and Republicans, but right now the big Democratic cities are under the spotlight, and I think that's the Republican Party effort, and Biden is trying to hold that back.
Madison Saavedra, the mayor this week, saying it could be as many as 2 dozen buses per day with migrants coming. How can the city handle that load?
I think that's a question that all of us have. They have struggled to keep up with the pace of buses that we've had for the past year. So just to be honest, I'm not sure. I think they're going to do a lot of the same of what they've been doing, standing up the temporary shelters, continuing to ask state and federal officials for money. But we'll have to see what kind of the next steps are if we really do see 2 dozen buses coming a day.
And Mike Mulligan, we said at the top, it's a political party divided because you've got alder people pointing hands at the governor pointing hands at the president. They're all part of the same party here. How have the governor and the mayor done in terms of handling this crisis?
I think they've tried to make their case. The fear here is we know what a Chicago winter is like. And I don't know how, if these buses keep arriving at the pace that we're talking about, are people going to sleep in buses? Are people going to, have heat in buses? I mean, it is a potential disaster. And I have no idea what the solution is. Clearly, something's going to have to happen. I wonder if they think people will just leave once it gets cold, right? And try to go to a warmer place. It is scary to think about what could happen when the Chicago winter.
And it's not just the winter. It's health. There are health concerns. Yes. There are safety concerns. There have been violent incidents. Some of the aldermen are complaining about how some of their shelters have become centers for prostitution, robbery, young children on the street, unattended. And you're right, Mike. Something's going to blow up, unfortunately, before the message really gets across.
But the reason the message might be getting across now, as you mentioned, Laura, it's politics.
Yes.
The president, the Democratic Party understands what's at stake now because this is happening in Democratic cities. And now, Jim Daly, there's some talk from the mayor that this $30 million contract for tent cities with this company called Gardaworld, that may not happen after all. Is there a plan B?
Not that I know of. I mean, they've hinted at potentially having a plan B, but they haven't explained what it is at all yet. At the same time, they haven't put down any tent stakes yet. There's no locations that have been proposed yet. The mayor asked aldermen to present locations, and aldermen have understandably been a little gun-shy about that because of the reactions that their communities might have. So, yeah, it looks like they are still moving forward with the tents, but nothing has happened in that direction. They might have a plan B, but we don't know what it is yet.
In Medicine Saavedra, I mean, you have community members even in Pilsen, one of the hearts of the Latino community in Chicago, pushing back against shelters there. I mean, what does that say about how difficult it is to find a location that is going to make people happy?
Well, I think it shows that the situation is really nuanced. Just because it's a Latino majority neighborhood doesn't mean that they're not going to raise concerns that this might be taking away attention, funding, resources from issues that their neighborhood has. Lots of people brought up, skyrocketing property taxes, increase in rent, underfunded and under-enrolled schools, just as things that they would love to see get addressed. Maybe instead of a shelter that's going to hold up to 1,000, migrants and, provide them with presumably clothes, food, things that nobody else in the neighborhood is going to have access to.
Well, I mean, you had one older person in the past saying this was pitting, the black community against the Latino community, but really it's pitting folks that are permanent residents versus folks that are new arrivals and worried about the resources. And Laura Washington and Governor Pritzker are saying the state has spent upwards of $330 million so far. Is there more state help on the way for the city?
No, that's not what the governor indicated this week. He's really putting the kibosh on that. Now, the House Leader Chris Welch met with the mayor on, I believe it was on Thursday, to discuss possibly putting something through the legislature. But I don't know that that's a very likely prospect too. We've got to run the state, we've got to run the city. We only have so many resources, and I think that was the message that J.B. Pritzker was trying to.
In Medicine Saavedra, what exactly is this trip to the border that the mayor is going to take and visit with Homeland Security officials?
It's not super clear yet exactly who's going to go or when this delegation is going to take its trip or really exactly where they're going to go. My understanding is that for them, success would look like coming back with some increased collaboration with officials and local groups down there in Texas. Mm-hmm. Collaboration is something that I think all city officials involved in this situation have been, that they wish it was there. There's just really no coordination or heads up, when buses are arriving, what the conditions are in terms of health conditions of the people who are on this bus, what their needs are they all adults, are there children involved, are there newborns involved? So my understanding is that if they can come back with a little bit more of a plan, maybe a little bit more of, sense of communication, I think that's what they're looking for.
Well, on that, let's hear what the mayor had to say. Things got a little testy when asked about going to the southern border. Take a look.
I have a wife, I have children, they have schedules. And plus, we still have public safety that we have to address. We still have the unhoused that we have to address. I still have a budget that I have to address. And I'm doing all of that with a black wife raising 3 black children on the west side of the city of Chicago. I am going to the border as soon as possible. But I got to coordinate that with running the government and making sure that my wife and children are secure as well.
Mike Mulligan, at the same time, you have a governor like Greg Abbott in Texas, and to a lesser extent, I guess, Governor DeSantis in Florida, although I don't know if he's still involved in this quite as much. I mean, is there anything to get them to curb just purposely sending folks here?
I'm sure they're delighted. I mean, there is a sinister element of this because it is all about politics. It's all about trying to punish different cities that were sanctuary cities. I'm sure they're delighted, because they have gotten to a point now where they're sending all these buses in and there's nowhere to do it. People are utterly confused about how to handle this problem. It's the lack of humanity involved in this is extraordinary. The idea that they're just going to keep sending buses, no one has any idea. The bus is here, oh, here we go. It's crazy.
It does seem like ultimately this is going to have to take some federal coordinated solution. There is no patchwork state, city level solution to this. I think we've made that clear so far. I want to talk about some other city council news. Alder people today approve raising the minimum wage for tipped workers, bartenders, other tipped workers to the regular minimum wage of $15.80 over a 4-year period. What do you think the impact of this will be?
Well, it depends on who you ask. The proponents of the measure, which passed by a pretty significant margin, I think it was 36-10 in the city council, are saying that this will even the playing field for workers who have been left out of the conversation, particularly women of color who are usually at the bottom of the work scale. The restaurant industry is very unhappy about it because they feel, not only the restaurant industry, but some of the aldermen have voted against it because they feel that it's going to hurt the restaurant business. It's going to help put, especially the smaller mom and pop restaurants, in more jeopardy financially, and that it may also affect tips. That if customers start to think, well, you know, these people are getting paid a minimum wage, why do I have to tip? So those are the arguments that are out there. But the proponents won a sound argument on that one.
And I think there are some workers that worry about that.
Sure.
And they work for tips, they get great tips, and now they're thinking, well, maybe folks won't be so prone to tip me so well because of the knowledge of the minimum wage. But it's 4 years now to phase this in, so we'll see.
And one of the things that the proponents are also saying that 4 years gives us time to tinker with the law. If we find that it's having this negative effect, if restaurants are closing or people are losing their tips, then maybe we can adjust.
Maybe gives the Restaurant Association a little room
Another chance.
another bite at the apple,
Right.
so to speak, or of the buffet. I want to also mention this controversial ShotSpotter contract, this machinery that's on poles all across the city that supposedly detects gunshots, and then police are dispatched to the area. Police Superintendent Snelling has touted its virtues. Mayor Johnson campaigned on getting rid of it. So who's going to win this argument here?
I mean, I think that, you know, Snelling has said repeatedly that he loves technology as a crime-fighting tool. I think that police generally love technology and surveillance tools, and I think it's also very difficult once you've got a piece of infrastructure in place to roll that back. There's a degree to which the genie's out of the bottle there. Johnson did campaign on getting rid of ShotSpotter, and Snelling has only said that he would talk to the mayor about it. So I'm not super optimistic that there will be a push from the city level to get rid of it. However, last week, a class action lawsuit by the MacArthur Center for Justice that alleges that CPD has used ShotSpotter in a discriminatory way for stop and frisks incidents, that was allowed to proceed by a federal judge. So this might wind up coming down to the courts.
And maybe the courts take that decision away from Mayor
Correct.
Johnson. He doesn't have to make that difficult decision that he campaigned on. All right, Mike Mulligan, NASCAR. It was wet, it was sloppy, didn't look like it was that well attended, but Choose Chicago says it made $9 million for the city.
That blows my mind, because I tell you what, like, the hotels weren't full, right? The hotels were full when Taylor Swift
July
was in
4th
town.
weekend.
And it was,
And when Lollapalooza was
and it
here.
was raining, and like I drive faster on Lakeshore Drive than those cars were. No offense to anyone, don't tell anyone. I think that it was very cool. I mean, I know they had to cut it off, and they had. I was kind of against it. I thought it was idiotic. I hated the idea that, like, the Art Institute, there was danger of something breaking, or they had to move some pieces of art. I thought that was insane. But I watched it, and I got to tell you, like, my kids watched it. It was really a beautiful postcard to Chicago in a way. Now again,
The city never looked better, despite the weather.
The city looked absolutely beautiful. And some of those shots they had coming off the lakefront, and I mean, I was surprised. I'm not a NASCAR guy, and I really thought, this is dumb. This is not our culture. Why are we putting a bunch of NASCAR people in the middle of Chicago? I thought it was sensational.
All right, but Jim Daly, let's dig into these numbers. $109 million economic benefit for the city. Is there some nuance here?
I think there's a lot of nuance. I mean, I think that those numbers, you know, we report them because it's touted as a study. But this is a study where the methodology is suspect, I think, and the data is very opaque. The lab in Temple University that did this study signed a confidentiality agreement with NASCAR to not release the data. I can't get a hold of any of the researchers who did that study. I did speak to Alan Sanderson, who's an economist at the U of C, who was very skeptical about it. He said that you can take that 100 million and move the decimal place 1 point to the left to get a better sense of it. But ultimately, if you look at the hotel numbers, USA Volleyball brought more people to Chicago hotels than NASCAR did, according to the report. The NASCAR number was 6,200 people, and USA Volleyball was 6,300. Another thing about that report is that all of the corporate spending estimates were given to the researchers by NASCAR themselves. And NASCAR came out with a projection before the race of how much economic impact there would be, and it was very similar. I think they estimated like 113 million. So I would take all of that with a huge grain of salt. There's also the fact, as Dr. Sanderson mentioned, that the impact study doesn't look at any of the loss of revenue. I reported that
What would have been that weekend? That's a very busy weekend.
It's a very busy weekend. Museum Campus said that they lost something like $3.5 million. The city spent $3 million on police overtime and resurfacing the roads. None of that was included in the report. So I think that the estimate of value was overstated, and they also didn't include the cost.
Let's just say there was never going to be a bad report here, no matter what happened, given what you're saying. So are you surprised Mayor Johnson didn't try to get out of this contract and brought it back for another year?
Well, you know, to your point earlier, it's a lot easier to stay in a contract and stay in a deal than to get out. And I think that, the mayor's a big booster for the city. He loves events. He loves the things that are going to bring people into the city, that are going to make them enjoy the city. So I think that that's one reason why it was attractive to him. The other issue, though, is the cost, our costs in terms of maintenance, in terms of cleanup and all that kind of thing. Now, he's saying that we renegotiated a deal that's going to reduce some of our costs, but there's no transparency in terms of what that really means.
They also said we're going to reduce the amount of time to set up and take down. So what's that going to look like now?
Well, hopefully it will deal with some of the other issues that the museum's having to close and other disruption if it's less time, but there's still going to be
they were working
cars
around the
running
clock,
around the street.
Building those stands, and so how can they do that in less time?
Good question.
And the traffic, I mean, even a couple days before, trying to get around there was rough.
Yeah.
And now you got some downtown aldermen saying, once again, we weren't consulted. I mean, where have we heard this before? We've heard this with every single previous mayors that kind of meet the new boss same as the old boss on these kinds of things.
I don't know if it's that or if it was just sort of a communication snafu, because the report came out, I think the NASCAR press release came out before the cities. So I'm not sure if they were caught unprepared or actually didn't consult the alders. The mayor's office claimed that they did do some sort of presentation with the downtown alders, but a number of the alders did say that they were not consulted. So I'm not really sure what.
And it's one thing to give a presentation, dog and pony show at the last minute. It's another thing to actually ask
To be in the room and help negotiate a contract,
exactly.
which seems to never happen with these big things. All right, Medicine Saavedra Block Club, your publication had a great story about the CTA president, Dorval Carter. His salary has risen 60% from when he started to $376,000 now, while the complaints of service problems have mounted, and there are no performance reviews, there are no audits of how he's done. Why so little accountability?
I'm not sure, because my colleagues who wrote this story, they found that leaders in similar positions in other big metros, they do have a contract. They have a more formalized performance review process. I think in response, CTA officials said, the board does regularly review, Dorval Carter's performance, even if it's not as formal, or if it doesn't look like what it looks like in other cities. They assured that they did. But I don't think you can ignore that whole situation and the increase in just riders being furious at how the CTA operates. I mean, things like ghost bus and ghost train, that's commonplace vernacular now. And I think it's an issue that really unites the city. Wherever you live, you've been ghosted.
And we'd love to invite, we do invite Mr. Carter on this program because he's kind of evaded public questioning. He hasn't really shown up at city council. Older people are kind of wondering where he is.
He doesn't show up on the CTA either. One of the things that the Block Club found is that he rarely takes the CTA. No wonder the CTA is in the shambles. He doesn't even know what's going on there. It's a mystery. And the mayor said during the campaign that he was unhappy with the CTA service, and that he at one point I think said that he would look at removing the CEO, but he's been pretty silent on it ever since then.
He is. All right. Well, again, that invite is open to the CTA president to come on, and any agency had to come on this program. Mike Mulligan, the invite is open also to Pat Fitzgerald if he'd like to come on and talk about this $130 million lawsuit now he's leveling against Northwestern.
I got to tell you, I heard a lot of that, the Dan Webb news conference. He's got like a high-powered attorney. We all know who Dan Webb is. And, frankly, he may well have a good case. I mean, they suspended him over the report that they were given, and pretty much 2 days later, all the information that was in the report apparently came out in the Daily Northwestern, and immediately the president fires him. There was no meeting with him. There was no kind of review over anything. He literally went from, oh, this is a suspension, why don't you take it during your vacation so it doesn't impact the football season, to, okay, you're fired. I mean, listen, if all this stuff is true, it's horrible. I'm not defending any of that, but there's like no due process whatsoever. And, the guy not only loses his $68 million, which was coming to him, all his future earning is impacted
his
by
reputation
that.
is pretty
His
much
reputation
soiled.
is ruined.
All right,
yeah.
well, let's hear what that attorney Dan Webb said about this lawsuit against Northwestern.
The fact that they've gone out and destroyed his reputation as one of the best football coaches in America based on no legitimate reason or evidence is disgraceful. It's despicable conduct on behalf of Northwestern, and my client and his family are entitled to their day in court for justice.
One of the best coaches in America. He was 1-11 in his last season.
He won Coach of the Year.
He
a
did
couple
win Coach.
times.
Yeah, he'd had a lot of success there. But they're now kind of trying to discredit the folks that came forward, saying that a couple of them had it out for Pat Fitzgerald, that this was kind of like a smear campaign.
Well, even if it was, is it true? Are the allegations true? And they're so widespread, it defies the imagination that he didn't know or didn't have some inkling that they were happening, and that's going to be the other side of the argument. And if they can, you would think that they're going to want to be able to document who said what to who when, to be able to show that he did have some knowledge, and ultimately he is responsible. He's the head of the team.
That's a good point, that maybe they have documents to show some of those things. All right, well, the Bears put quite a document on Thursday Night Football, especially DJ Moore, the receiver, 238 yards receiving or something like that. You spoke with him this morning.
Yeah, I mean, what an unbelievable performance by him, and what an incredible performance by the team. I don't think anybody expected that. They had, of course, lost 14 consecutive games. And, I do a pregame show with Olin Kreutz and Patrick Manley, both of whom changed their pick. They were going to pick Washington to win. They went with the Bears because Dick Butkus had passed away. And they were in Green Bay on the night the Bears won after Walter Payton had died 6 days earlier.
I remember that. That was 1998, and there was a field goal block at the last second.
Brian
it was miraculous.
Robinson, he said that he could feel Walter holding him up. And I think they just felt that there was, this great Bears legend had passed away, and that somehow would mean something. And I don't know how they meant it, but I got to tell you, there was some divine intervention so the Bears could win that game, because they have gone so long without any
almost
victory.
a full calendar year, although Justin
Yes.
Fields has put 2 pretty good performances back-to-back.
Yes.
Is he finally arrived?
It's a great question, and I think it's one they still have to figure out. And of course, we've got to see where they end up in the draft. There's a great player available. It's very hard to tell where they are at right now. They have a very winnable schedule. They've got about 5 games in a row. They could actually stack some wins. Problem is, they're still the team that lost those games. They're still the team that has these injuries. Are they actually fixed? It remains to be seen.
And there were a bunch of subs last night. But
Yes,
before last night,
incredible.
24 hours ago, we were talking about Matt Eberflus. Maybe
Getting
his
fired.
days being numbered.
Yeah, there was.
So
there
did he
was
save his job
rumors-
for the year at least?
Well, I don't know if for the year, but he saved it for this week for sure. Next 10 days are going to be glorious.
Well, all right, so let's talk about Dick Butkus, because you brought him up. I mean, perhaps other than Walter Payton, no greater Bears icon. What is his lasting legacy to you?
I think that, number one, you want to talk about like a local guy made good story. Dick went to CVS, went to Illinois, always wanted to play for the Bears. They had, I think, 2 or 3 winning seasons. He never went to the playoffs. It's like extraordinary the way that he played, and the ferociousness and the commitment for a lot of losing teams.
And I think people feared him before the ball was ever snapped.
He was the most feared man in football. And he used to hit people and make them feel that he was coming, and he loved to send that message. I'm telling you, he represents so much of what Chicago is about. And I think, kind of son of the city, and things ended poorly, and he never lived here again, although he owned some properties.
It ended poorly with Hallis, basically.
Well, that's it. Yeah, his knee, he had a bad knee, and he and Hallis had a big argument about Butkus took him to court to get the money he felt he was due, and they had a settlement. But
then Butkus,
he was away from the team for a long time.
He had a second career as a pretty good performer.
He was an actor. He was in all these movies, and he was
TV shows.
TV.
He was the coach of Deering High School on Hang Time, on NBC.
That's exactly
what a
right.
career. All right, we are out of time. So our
Lovely
thanks
fellow.
to Laura Washington, Jim Daly, Madison Saavedra, and Mike Mulligan. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors. Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight, Week in Review, is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr and the Mollenhauer Progressive Philanthropic Fund in honor of Ida Mollenhauer, supporting quality journalism.
And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Remember, watch us again at 7 if you couldn't get enough of this conversation. Have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose attorneys embrace a culture of philanthropy and service by volunteering their time, expertise, and guidance to help others in the greater Chicago community.